Hi, everyone. Welcome to our session today. How will the 2020 disruption impact the momentum of the sports betting rollout here in the US? And I'm very happy to have the pleasure to be chatting with three established experts in that space, Bill, Krešimir, and Seth. Welcome. And we will kick off right away with the first question. How has the postponement of major sports events impacted sports betting in the US? So, Bill, if you want to start, and then everyone else can just chime in.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Good, obviously very relevant and timely question. Obviously, nobody had the first to see it coming, but the reality is what it's really done is forced us to look at different sporting competitions. We are obviously chasing different sporting events to bring to the operators to pitch to offer to their audience. So it really is now about finding live competitions that we can bring back, in front of punters and bettors in today's market. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, I don't think we need to take too much time to point out the obvious, but I'll say for our part, PointsBet is still full steam ahead working on product and making improvements to technology. We're very excited to roll out in states like Illinois, Colorado, and Michigan. Clearly, it's a very difficult time for people around the globe, but if I have to search for any silver lining, it's that on the advocacy side, the argument for convenience or mobile gaming is entirely strengthened in the United States. And we know data shows that online gaming is already accretive and not cannibalistic to land-based gaming. So with nearly all of the casinos closed in this country at this point, I think there's a general recognition that an online gaming profile in each state could help mitigate the impact of casino closures while still providing a safe and entertaining product to interested consumers. So this is to say, I think that perhaps the opponents of online gaming have now become proponents of it, given the circumstances and given the interests of future-proofing and operations. So outside of that obvious, I think it's going to be a pretty busy back half of the year and a busy 2021 in state legislatures as states that desperately need tax revenue to fund public policy initiatives consider how sports betting and online gaming might help. So I think that may be the biggest impact to sports betting in the macro environment. And it's fair to say that good operators are always willing partners of a state government.
From our perspective, as Seth kind of said, it's very simple. It completely depleted our revenues and key KPIs, but this is expected because there is no live events. I think from operator perspective, it also opened up the eyes and understanding that mobile is a big and very important part of our operations, especially for brick and mortar companies. And we can see even with the annual and the quarterly reports that more and more CEOs and CFOs of a brick and mortar company are emphasizing the importance of the mobile product and what this can do for them in the future. Third, I also think that increased the desire from consumers and audience about the sports content. So once we are back live and when the live events are again up and running, I think that we're going to have a high viewership and probably an increased interest into sports betting related to it.
Yeah, so you all pointed out how important online sports betting is, and I think there's no doubt about that. If we look into markets like New Jersey, where we have online sports betting basically before the virus hit, already being like 85% of all the revenues. So how do you see that moving forward? Do you see now is the time for innovation, to be innovative and come up with new products like virtuals, esports? Or do you more expect people and operators to go back to basics? If you want to start, Seth, I think that would be great.
Sure. I don't think there's ever a bad time to consider innovation. Innovation should be an always-on thing. But to your point, I think there have been some lesser-known leagues and events available throughout this period, like Belarusian soccer and Russian table tennis. Table tennis in particular has been pretty fun to watch, but no, they're not exactly replacements for the major American sports that are known and loved by the American consumer. Esports betting, for another example, is largely unavailable for betting in U.S. jurisdictions where PointsBet is operational. Esports aren't necessarily approved by statute as a market that can be New Jersey and likely in other jurisdictions are only available for those with a casino license. So I'm not sure really if they've taken off as much in the nascent youth market as much as they've carved out a niche over time in more mature and established markets. I think for our part, at least what I can say is in Australia, the racing industry has been handled very professionally and safely in a thoughtful, considered way throughout this time. And we booked fixed odds racing there. So that's been a very good ballast for us as it's continued. We've seen definitely an increase in popularity in something like that. On that note, and before I pass it back, I think fixed odds racing in the United States is something that really should be considered by regulators and states moving forward. It really could save the racing industry here and allow sports betting operators to have something to add to their calendar and also engage people with something that they already love.
How about Hard Rock? Any product innovation nowadays?
I mean, what we used to and what we use this time is actually reflecting on our overall strategy. I think since PASPA has been repealed and 20 markets basically legalized sports betting, we are all running a race. And we've been running a race to the point that we haven't had time really to revisit what we are doing, focus on our product, focus on our operations, and how we are going to position ourselves in the market. I think that this couple of months actually was a good reflection points to all of us, kind of slow down and reflect and pinpoint where are our weaknesses and where we can have our improvements. Our strategy was always to become kind of the leading bricks and clicks company, meaning converging both worlds, the brick and mortar world that we are a very prominent player, and the second one, mobile world, in which we started to participate right now. So our focus was very heavily on merging these two worlds and creating kind of a product which enables single sign-up, single wallet, and very similar user experience across all our touch points.
And from Genius experience, now with COVID being on, from a company's perspective, Bill?
What we have to do, and the challenge is obviously bringing content to the operators, and what we really look at is that the entire experience that the data can support, which is the UI, UX. So the opportunity now to live stream some of these lower tier sports and bring it to the relevance of the audience that's now very hungry for sporting events has been really just eye-opening to the reality that these lower tier sports are actually very engaging to the audience. So it's very relevant to marry up, not just the big four sports in the U.S., but there's actually a good way to engage your audience with not necessarily, your typical top four sports.
Perfect. Coming back to the regulations a little bit, before COVID basically hit the market, operators were basically fighting for market share, market access in the different states. Do you expect a slowdown on that moving forward?
Yeah. Sorry, Seth. I'll start. I mean, I don't expect that much is going to change. It's 2 months in. If the live event starts as it's planned and majority of the sports should continue, there are certain calendars out there that are in place. I don't think that 2 months have done much that will change current situation in the US in terms of who are the leaders and who are the followers. So this is just kind of a slow setback. If this continues for another few months, situation might have changed, but I don't expect drastic changes in regards to this.
Yeah, and I by the way, Krasimir, I love when you say bricks and clicks. It's one of my favorite sayings. You should keep doing that. I agree with everything you said. I'm not sure that much has changed in the landscape from a strategic perspective. I think there maybe are some operators who may think that this levels the playing field in some regard. Some operators may not feel that way. Time will tell.
Okay, we are having now almost 2 years of a regulated market here in the US. So PASPA was repealed May 14th, 2 years ago. So what are the key learnings from your all's perspective? So maybe, Bill, if you want to start.
We've had, in this current pandemic, I think the underlying, the positive that's really come out of this is the attentiveness that the regulatory organizations have given to approving certain sporting events that in regular times may have been much more difficult to get approved. So I think what we're seeing now is a much more open approach to looking at different competitions to get them approved. Different states are going to approve competitions quicker because I think it's going to, in the end, it's going to correlate to tax revenue that obviously is going to be extremely critical to all these states as they open up.
Yeah, I'll dovetail off that. I think with more and more data that comes out of the regulated market, really what we're learning is that online sports betting and gaming is a great source of revenue for states that are looking to fund public policy initiatives. So long as there's a reasonable business structure to govern the activity that makes it investable for operators who are effectively partners of the state government. And there's a clear consumer demand for a convenient form of gaming in mobile. Ignoring trends and ignoring reality doesn't make the demand go away. It just means that consumers will continue to engage in black market activity that satisfies that demand until there's a legal option. So I think we continue to learn that prohibition doesn't work, especially in the United States. Imagine that. As for what the future holds, I guess I've asked this question a lot, and my answer is the only thing I'm certain of is that the future is always uncertain, but that's the allure of the gaming business.
From operator perspective, it's very simple. Size matters. I mean, we are seeing the strong market leaders or the guys which have a big known brand, some kind of pre-existing database, and deep pockets and willingness to lose money for a few years before they gain a significant market share when they can start making money. And I think this is what is going to be tested in the US in the next few years. Who is willing actually to lose 2-3 years money and invest tens and hundreds of millions of dollars to ultimately reap a huge benefit of a very sizable $8 billion market, which is predicted by 2023 or 2025, depending which analyst you're looking at.
To me, it's almost you've got the gift of time. The gift of time right now is really to get your product right. It's almost like we've almost reset where we were, and now we get to go out with improvements that hopefully will capture more market share is the way I look at it.
Yeah, Krešimir, you made a good point about the size of the market. So basically, the bigger markets like Florida, for example, California, Texas. How do you see that being based in Florida? When do you expect the market to get live?
I mean, in Florida specifically, there is quite a complicated situation with Amendment 3, which requires a referendum to actually legalize the sports betting. Texas, it hasn't shown so far affinity to legislation. California, there is a tribal initiative, as you know, which is trying to legalize sports betting, but only on a tribal lands and a physical casinos. So I think that it will be a while now until these big states actually open up, New York as well of them. What could change, though, is something which is probably going to happen, which is austerity measures. We are seeing right now that the revenues basically of the states will be impacted by 10, 20%, and they are going to be lacking a budget. Will this basically require a special session to revisit the budget for this year and the following year? And will this be an opportunity to introduce basically either sports betting or a new format of sports betting, meaning mobile, and maybe even add an online casino to it? It's to be kind of seen, because some people are claiming the governments have higher priorities than this, that they will focus and maybe don't have time for the gaming, but at the same time, gaming is something that can bring immediate tax revenues and can help basically states to balance basically losses which they had so far. So hopefully one or two of these few big states we can see happening in the next year or two.
And hopefully the states realize that allowing operators to provide an entertaining product to the citizens of that state may be helpful because it's fun. Yeah,
that's a good point. One topic that probably remains a pain point for a lot of operators is customer acquisition costs. So, Sas, if you want to start, how do you see that? Are those costs still at the same level? Will something change now through COVID? How do you see that moving forward?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a very political answer for me. It could be fair to say that while everything's changed, nothing's changed. I don't think it's really possible to answer this question yet. What I can say at PointsBet is our strategy is to continue to execute on our plan and provide a world-class sport and gaming entertainment experience to consumers interested in our product. So, yeah. format?
I think that currently, if you have to separate when it comes to the sports betting, I mean, there was a weaker interest last couple of months, and even acquiring the players haven't been bringing much of a value because there wasn't enough events and markets to bet on. When it comes to the casino, actually, there was a more interest from players into that product, and it was cheaper to acquire players. Long term, I think actually that competition is going to increase. I believe that the price of the acquisition is going to grow to the point where market does not mature and stabilizes, and there are basically few players in the market. They will be able to compete, and others will slowly but surely drop.
From a data perspective, for us, it's about storytelling. It's us being able to take the deep dive into the data, translate that over to stories and narratives that then can be converted into ads and ad placements that are actually going to stimulate, growth, whether it's the recreational bettor or whether it's the existing bettor. The idea is basically we've got to come up with ways to keep the energy and enthusiasm for sports betting, front and center in front of the general audience.
So if you would take a look 12 months ahead, what do you think will we be seeing moving forward in the market? Is there anything you want to kind of point out what you think would be more innovative, would probably be now because of COVID and development that we wouldn't have had otherwise? How do you see that 12 months from today? What can we expect in the next year?
I'm happy to jump in on that. I think you're going to see operators focusing on really interesting product initiatives, diversifying their product base, and making better product and better features, better technology for their consumers, and look to come out of this stronger. This will end at some point, one way or the other. Hopefully it ends safely. And I think as we've discussed with the advocacy side being strengthened so much, I do think we see sports betting continue to be pushed through legislatures. I do think we start to see that as a catalyst for some online gaming, which will lead to more and more innovation as companies have more and more gaming mechanics that they can innovate upon. So I'm quite excited for the future. 2018 was a tipping point, and for better or for worse, I think we're at another one.
I'm thinking that we are still in the next 12 months back to basics, which means making sure that you launch in every market, that you have a market access. In addition to this, you're still in a brand building phase and actually educating the consumers. What do we offer and what do we represent? And I expect the true innovations to happen 2-3 years down the road when their market is more mature, the brands are already established, consumers are already educated, and now it's about the offering and what you can offer to the consumers.
Yeah, I think we've been able to capture some really rich data points, up to this point when we've had to essentially go on hold. So I think just learning from that experience is just going to fuel the innovation that we all keep speaking about as we roll out into more and more states becoming more opening up.
Perfect. So as we are all in the sports betting business, question for you guys. So what do you bet? When will we have sports being live? And I'm speaking about the major US sports, let's say NFL, NBA, MLB, NHL. What's your guess? What's your bet?
I think we've seen reported on ESPN that Major League Baseball is considering a plan fairly soon. I'm going to bet there's going to be an NFL season. Outside of that, I'm not going to opine. I'm very excited as a sports fan to see what may come back. But I've never made a bet in my life. I don't intend to make another.
I think for what I'm thinking more about when, I'm thinking how. I mean, will this be just sports going on without any audience and attendance on the stadium? Most likely at first. Will all the events be happening at one location, or players and the teams will be able to travel around? I think this is going to be tested and seen. Bundesliga in Germany is starting in a week time, and I think this will be a first significant league that is opening up and a good test to see how this is going to work. I think it will also create some problems for pricing and traders because from personal experience, being a professional sportsman, it's very different when you play in front of the empty stadia and when you play in front of 50 and 60,000 people. I think this will also create some pricing issues and how you position and learnings in regards to this. So, I mean, this is really uncertain future. We are just going to go through this and learn and try to handle it the best way that we can.
Yeah, from our perspective, I think that's a really good point, Krasimir, regarding the pricing. I mean, from a trading perspective, I think as long as you're confident that your models are right, I think that will take care of itself. But the fact that everything's starting up at the same time, and it will present some challenges. But I think that's just something that's a good problem that we're looking forward to. But to answer your question, as far as my bet would be on MLB for mid June. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed.
Perfect. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.